So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a whole bunch of stuff, A to Z, starting from like the top. I just got to figure out how to spend money, or like the very basics, all the way to like family planning, through your death. So we're going to talk about all of it today. And like I said, it's going to be a bit of a fire hose, but yeah, thanks. But that's okay. And I am totally cool if in the middle of me talking, if you're like, I have a question about this, feel free to interrupt me. It's okay. I can handle it. Otherwise, I will keep going. Oh, and I have to give the legal disclaimer that I am not a financial planner. This is for educational purposes only and not intended to be specific financial advice. So if you are uncomfortable making your own decisions, talk to a certified financial planner for suggestions about your specific situation. So now with that out of the way, I'll give you some specific advice on what I think you should do. But yeah, so all of this starts with a plan, right? You got to kind of have this, here's what I'm doing to get into it. And there's this B word in financial talks that everyone hates. It's called budget, and we all hate that. So instead we call it a spending plan, because spending sounds a whole lot more fun. And but it's essentially the exact same thing. I remember I watched this, there's this Saturday Night Live skit that they once did, and it was super funny, where all they did was, there was this guy saying he was doing like a financial infomercial. He goes, I wrote this new book on financial planning. He goes, and it's only one sentence long, and it's simply spend less than you earn. And it's this whole thing, it has Steve Martin in it, and he goes, okay, I think I get it, but let's pretend like I really want to get something and I don't have the money. Should I get it? He's like, no. Only, spend less than you earn. It's super funny. And the entire skit is them just trying to figure out ways like, but what if I really, really, really want it? He goes, well, do you have the money? Yes. He goes, then you can get it. He goes, cool, awesome. So that's like this basic rule. But it's just like spend less than you earn is kind of like that overarching concept. If you always do that, you will be okay. And underneath that, we're talking about ways to optimize from there. So step one when determining, trying to figure that out, is determining what is important to you. And so the goal of that conscious spending plan is to decide exactly what you're going to spend on based on those things that are important to you. And then my recommendation would be to ruthlessly cut everything else. And so I'm going to go into a whole bunch of examples with that. But there are some things for me that are really important. Like I love to read. I finally come to terms with the fact that I'm a bookworm. And so for me, I will spend a lot of money buying books. I think I've read about 20 this year so far, because I'm just a reader. That's what I do. So I do that. But we do not have cable. And I actually borrow my brother's, I probably shouldn't put this on video, I borrow my brother's Netflix account, so we don't even pay for that, because that's just not important to me. And they are going to come out with some new rules, which is going to make it interesting, but I'll have to make some choices, which is okay. So to be clear, I am not saying never spend money. I'm saying quite the opposite. Spend on things that are important to you, and then just cut everything else. So one way that you get started with kind of figuring that out is, what am I spending my money on and where do I need to cut, is by tracking your expenses. Now, this used to be really, really hard because you actually had to have like a spreadsheet and track it all yourself. But now there are a ton of paid and free tools out there. One of them that is free is Mint.com, mint.com. It's really good. They're owned by Intuit, who does like TurboTax and all those other ones. And it's really awesome. You go in and you add your account credentials, and it pulls the last 90 days, and then you can tag all of your transactions, and it just it helps with a whole bunch of stuff. Super helpful. That is what I personally use. But there are also a whole bunch of other ones out there. One's called YNAB, youneedabudget.com. There's an envelopes, starts with the letter M for some reason, system. And so there's a bunch that are out there. My recommendation, pick one, spend the time to learn how to use it, and then stick with it regularly. That's the trick. And then once you have that baseline for where you are spending, the next step is to start with small changes. You don't want to get too radical because it's going to kind of be, chances are it'll be too extreme, and then you'll yo-yo back and it'll cause problems. And the way that I've thought about them is treating them as experiments. So like, for example, we might say, hey, let's cut our cable for 1 month and just see how it goes. We're not committing to our life of never watching TV again, just for a month. And then you can decide if okay, was this something that actually added value to my life? Am I really missing it, or am I not? And then I would also say, just in general, strive for simplicity on things. And there's this really interesting concept in psychology called hedonic adaptation. And so it's this idea that we are all frogs in pots of water that are slowly getting warm. And so you adjust to whatever level of living you have, and it becomes normal. So like, for example, we all got phones. And when you first got it, you're like, yeah, new phone, awesome features, takes great photos, extra battery life. And then within a couple of weeks, you're like, yeah, it's my phone, I dropped it, big deal. We just get used to things. And so as a result, we keep seeking for novelty and excitement. And so now we got to ratchet up. I got to get the newer phone. I got to get this new feature. I have to do these things. And so the trick to short circuit that is to try to reset at a lower level. And so maybe, again, you go, this might be extreme, but you go a month without a phone. And so then you're like, oh man, just any kind of phone would be really nice to have. And so that's something to just keep in mind if you find yourself just slowly finding like, yeah, I have to have bigger, better, nicer of something. You have the short-term pain of, okay, I'm just going to cut this out completely, and then you can start building back up again. Okay, so I want to give you some ideas on things you can do to reset to that lower level, all right? And I have, it looks like 8 of them. So just, again, these are just ideas. So pick one where you go, ooh, this sounds interesting, or doesn't, and that's okay. So I've already talked about it because it's my whipping boy. Cut your cable or streaming services. You know, if you've got 2 or 3, try just one. And again, these are all experiments, not forever. You could, I wrote here, lower your thermostat by 1 to 2 degrees, but I think that was back when, in the winter time when I wrote that. So maybe raise your thermostat 1 or 2 degrees, right? We're not talking huge changes, but they can just start to add up over time. Because hedonic adaptation actually works physically as well. And so you actually get used to the warmer temperature. And so just kind of preempt it. Don't eat out for a month. This would actually be personally very hard for me, but that's something that you could do. For your next purchase, see about getting it used instead of new. So like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace are awesome places to find stuff. My wife is an expert. She never buys new clothes. That's her, she is awesome at the cheap shopping. She loves Ross. She likes going to gear swap stuff. She loves it. I think she said for our kids, for the first 5 years, she didn't buy them a single piece of clothing. And she's like, dude, they're going to grow out of it in 4 months anyways, so why spend money on it? Again, get it used instead of new. On your next vacation, an example, go camping. And if you don't have something, borrow it from a friend instead of just impulse or, my normal speed would be like, oh, I'll just go on Amazon and order it real quick. Now, instead, it's like, let me see who has it. Let's see here. Okay, look at your previous spending. And so again, if you're on something like Mint, you can look at all those categories and you can say, what would life be like if I didn't do it? So just a mental exercise, just kind of walking through it. Again, you're not necessarily physically doing it, but saying, oh yeah, could I survive without this thing? And then my wife and I, we actually did this one once. What if you closed off a whole room in your house just to see if you could live in a smaller space? So we did that once. We were in a 3-bedroom. It was just the 2 of us. It was a 3-bedroom place. We were pretty sure it was bigger than what we needed. And so we cut off an entire room. We didn't warm it. We didn't cool it. We actually put a little sock underneath it. So it was this isolated thing. And from that, we decided, you know what? We don't actually need a 3-bedroom. So we moved into a 2-bedroom place as a result of that. So again, it's just that's an experiment that could potentially lead to something bigger. Something that's really important is if you are married, it's critical to get your husband on board to do these experiments with you. So I wouldn't just change the thermostat and not say anything. That's a different experiment altogether. But there you go. Yeah. And if you are looking for inspiration, I've got some resources at the end, but one of them in particular is called Mr. Money Mustache, and there's a minor language warning, but he's got really great ideas for living crazy cheap. He's an engineer, and he kind of applied that engineering mindset towards all sorts of stuff. He even got into the details of here's how to drive your car more efficiently to use less gas. He actually installed this meter in it. He's insane level, but it gives you really good ideas for, oh yeah, here's what I can do. And I will find myself, and now when I'm driving, oh, okay, I gotta I could use this concept, and yeah. So that is the conscious spending plan. So again, create the plan, have a way to track it, and then start with some experiments for things that you want to cut that aren't important to you. And if something is important, spend. It's all good. And as long as you're spending less than you earn, like, you're okay. All right, I'm going to pause. Any questions there? It's okay to say no. Sweet. This next one I stole from Dave Ramsey because it's really good. And it's simply, it's one of his, I think it's his first baby step, I believe. And it's save $1,000 to start an emergency fund. And when I talk to tenants, this is the exact advice that I give them. I say, if you have one life emergency, it doesn't very quickly turn into 2 life emergencies on the first of the month. And I'll tell them, like, yeah, I have an incentive for you to have an emergency fund. And I think that's true for everybody, right? And $1,000 seems, at least, back in the day, it's still true, I think is that enough of a buffer where it's going to get you through 80% of issues that you might have, or at least give you enough time to fully solve the problem. And so if you are spending less than you earn, you should be able to put that $1,000 away. I have a recommendation there of opening up a savings account that is separate from your main savings account. So if, like, we bank with Wells Fargo, we have a savings account with Capital One. And so for me to transfer, it takes 3 days, which really means, like, okay, is this an emergency? Like, let me think about this because it's going to take 3 days for it to happen. Right? And so the reason why I like Capital One is they tend to have just higher interest rates on your savings accounts. There's some other stuff later on that we'll get into why I like them. But Capital One's kind of like, they let you create sub-savings accounts. This is going to sound insane, but we have like 16 savings accounts. Yeah, I saw that. So, like, for example, we have one for an emergency fund, we have one for car maintenance, we have one for vacations, we have one, my wife likes to buy gifts for people, and so we have one for her that saves up for the gifts, so she has an account. We have one for giving, which I'll talk about later. We have one for just like irregular expenses that happen, like car insurance doesn't happen all the time, and so we regularly save each month for it. And so, so you can get crazy detailed if you want. I like it. Like I said, the interest rates tend to be like slightly more than everybody else, but the main thing is pick one that is not easy to get to that day. That is the main thing. Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah, they're fine. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't used them, but yeah, I mean, as long as your main account isn't with them. No. Okay, then yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you were like, I don't know, you could do Wells Fargo and Chase, like that would be totally fine. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I have, like I said, I've got our personal stuff is with Wells Fargo, our business stuff is with Oregon State Credit Union, and there's pros and cons to both. I do like the localness of the credit union. Wells Fargo's app is better, so, there's pluses and minuses. So the point of the $1,000 is to only use it in case of an actual emergency. Kind of going back to that SNL skit where they're like, but what if I want this big TV? That's not an emergency. It really is things where it's like, I put them in like the life and death category, or this is going to create a really big fine or fee. I'm going to get kicked out of my house. Like those are emergency types of stuff. If you do use that fund, then you want to focus on refilling it again. Stop on whatever next step you might be on that we're going to talk about next. Like stop saving for fun activities and get that emergency fund back up to where it needs to be. That is like your, so spending less than you earn is by far number one. This is the quick number two. You want to have that backup. You want to have some sort of buffer. Any other questions about that? Sweet. All right, the next one is paying off all your debt using the debt snowball. I'm just curious, real quick, anyone here have some debt in the room? Okay, a couple hands. Sweet. Or not sweet, but I get it. It's sweet because it'll be relevant to you. All right, so I know that like investing money sounds like a lot of fun, but you actually want to pay off your debt first. And part of the reason for that is that you get a guaranteed return on the debt that you've paid off. Like with investing, it may go up or down, but if you have some sort of debt with an interest of 5%, it's a guaranteed 5% return. So you want to do that. Plus there's some other reasons for it. So first thing you want to do is figure out how much you can pay extra towards your debt. And again, that's going to be off that like your spending plan that you've created. And then you want to list out all your debts. And there's things like credit cards, store cards, car loans, personal loans, student loans, all sorts of stuff. And for each of those, you want to record the balance and the monthly payment. Now, here's where things get a little interesting, and different finance wonks will have a different opinion on this, but you want to order them from smallest balance to the biggest balance. And you're going to start with the smallest balance. The interest rate, you'll notice, I don't care. We're not mentioning that or talking about it. It's really not that important. And the reason for that, I actually sat down on a spreadsheet once to try to prove this out to myself, because we had some student loans at one point in time. We had a car loan, which is a crazy story all by itself. We had a car. It turned out it was not street, like you couldn't drive it. It was there was an issue with it. And so then we had to essentially give away that car and buy another car, but we had spent all of our money on the first car, and so then we got a car loan for the second one. It was a mess, but there it is. So anyway, so we had one of those. Yeah.
You say that you need to start with the smallest balance to the larger, you mean that you choose the longest payoff and choose smaller monthly payments?
Yeah, so let's say you've got student loans of $30,000, you got a car loan of $10,000, and you've got an outstanding credit card balance of $1,500. You start with the credit card because it's the lowest balance. And then you would move to the car loan and then the student loan. Even though I think from an interest rate standpoint, it's actually going to be opposite. Credit card's going to be the highest. And so that's kind of the thought. And the reason for this is twofold. Number one, you get a quick win, right? If you're doing ones that have the small balance, you pay it off the fastest. And the logic that really won me over is this idea of okay, let's say you're going after the big balance first because I just want to get rid of this thing. And 2 years from now, something happens. I don't know, you lose your job, something changes. If you've been only working on this one loan, it's probably not going to be paid off in those 2 years. And so you're still going to have all of the same minimum balances that you have to pay. Whereas if you start with a small loan, in a couple of years, chances are that one's going to be paid off. And now your total minimum payments has actually gone down. And so it helps you in the future.
And I think also that the issue with the credit card is that this is the one that helps you build up your score, like your credit score. So if $1,500 are not paid, or you're paying the students and the car's loans, then still you'll be penalized.
Well, okay, so yeah, great clarification. So you want to do the minimum payment for everything, and then what you're going to do is you're going to pick one of them, which is the lowest balance, and you're going to say, whatever extra money I have, I'm going to put towards that one.
Okay.
Yeah. I pay the minimum on everything.
You're not holding off on the two other ones.
Correct.
Because
at
some point you will receive a very beautiful letter saying.
Correct. Yeah.
Trouble, man.
You wanna do that minimum payment, even if you have one that has higher interest. You still will do that minimum payment if that's not the largest balance. Okay. And then once that one is paid off, what you're going to do, and this is called the snowball debt payment strategy, you then take whatever that extra you were paying on that first loan and you roll it into the second one, and then the next one and the next one. Again, my wife and I think at the time we had 5 or 6 just various things. And part of it was for student loans, we had a lot. Combined together, we had about $80,000 worth of student loans, but it was split between 4 different loan amounts. And so we did that snowball method. And I wanted to be hey, let's have fun with this. I want to feel motivated. So for the very first one, I think we were paying, it was just an extra, for the total amount, it was $100 a month is what we started out with. And then what I said was, hey, let's take a month off, roll in on to the next one, and let's do something fun. So we went and got pedicures because I was that sounds like fun. And that was how we rewarded ourselves. And then the next month, we took that $100 and we rolled it into the next one. By the time we got to the last one, we were doing $1,600 a month towards that last loan. And so then we went to Disney World because we had, because we were and I think that time too, I was let's not just do 1 month, let's do a couple months, and let's go reward ourselves for getting rid of all of our short-term debt. So that was how we did it. And so that's how you can snowball. And it genuinely goes fast. I did a whole spreadsheet thing where I did one where I said, okay, let's do it by the smallest balance total. Now let's do it by the highest interest total, because technically that's the best way to do it from the amount of money spent. But when I did the comparison, the monthly payoff was I included my home mortgage in this too because I really wanted to see like what the difference would be. In the time period, it was like a 3-month time difference between doing the smallest balance versus the highest interest. And the one thing that really got it to move faster was adding a little bit extra more. Like if I was like, oh, if I can do an extra $50 a month, that cut off an entire month. And so I just like, so that would be the focus should be on how do we pay more towards it as opposed to how do I get the order perfectly right. Just start smallest balance and go from there. Yeah, great. Any other questions? Cool, that's a good one. So once you've paid off all your debt, the next thing you want to do is you want to accumulate 3 to 6 months of expenses in savings. So it's essentially taking that $1,000 and saying, okay, let's take it to the next level. I thought this was interesting. According to the Bureau Labor of Statistics, it takes someone between 10 to 22 weeks to find a new job, or 2.5 to 5.5 months. So when I say have your living expenses of 3 to 6 months, it's bracketed around that particular statistic. That will give you enough time if like the worst thing happens, I no longer have income. That's not the worst thing. Financially, I no longer have income. That should give you a time to do it. And by the way, here's where living simply and frugally has this double benefit from all those experiments. Because not only does living more frugal help you save faster, but you don't have to save as much on this particular step. So it's really nice. So that would be my recommendation. So what you want to do is you want to take that snowball that you've created from paying off the debt and now roll that into this particular savings account. So it's not going to take, hopefully, that will help you save the 3 to 6 months a lot faster. So the way that you figure out is pretty straightforward. You take your average monthly expenses, which you've been tracking, right, in Mint or wherever, and you're then going to multiply it by 3 and then by 6. And there's a question of like, okay, do I do 3 or do I do 6? Like, what's the right amount? And a lot of it's just going to depend on your risk portfolio, like or preference. How do you feel about it? How does your husband feel about it? I know some people where they do an entire year because they're just like, I really want to be secure. My wife and I, we are down closer to the 3-month range. And part of it is because of the nature of my business, I have a bunch of tenants. It's really, really rare that I, from an income standpoint, am going to just lose it all. I might have a really big tenant who moves out and I go, oh, okay, this is a problem. But it's not like, like I don't go from 100% income to 0. I usually I could fluctuate 20%, but that's about it. So we're able to go lower as a result of that. And I don't have a job. And that's my other, I could get another job if needed and solve that problem pretty quick. So again, it's all kind of going to depend on where you're at, on what number you choose, that 3 to 6. And I know some people where they start with 3, they go, okay, that was a lot of work, whew, I'm going to breathe. And then maybe 5 years later, you move to 6. I know for some people, it depends on how many kids you have. That also will determine that risk factor. Is it one person working or both people working? Those are all determinations. And I think for a lot of people, honestly, it's a gut feel. Look at the number for 3, look at the number for 6, and you're like, which one do I feel comfortable with? And you'll just know, and just go with that. Honestly, if you have 3, you're already way ahead of most people. So yeah, so if you do that, you're in a good spot. All right, this is one I had to significantly cut back this next section on increase your income. I could talk for 2 hours about this, but I'm not going to because it is fun. Yeah, so what I do want to say, I read this quote in a book on financial, on personal finance, and I thought it was great, so I want to share it with you. And his book I listed at the end. It says, "There's nothing wrong with making a lot of money. What matters is your heart. Someone who lies and cheats to get ahead doesn't automatically become honorable once she has more. On the other hand, a generous person who earns more doesn't automatically become stingy and greedy. Money simply reveals and amplifies what is already within the heart of a person." So just so you don't need to be afraid of it. And if you are, that's a conversation that's worth having. So I would say that successful careers or businesses are the intersection of 3 things. And we're going to talk a little bit about all 3 of them. So the first question is asking, what are you deeply passionate about? right? So some questions to help kind of prompt your thinking on this is what comes easy to you? What feels like work to others, but is fun to you? Doing dishes is work to me, but like some people enjoy it. I guess that's super weird. But for me, I love talking with tenants. Like that is fun for me. I enjoy that process. There are other people who are like, oh, dude, I just like that's the worst part of it. So what is fun to you that others think is work? What can you do that most people aren't good at? I am really good at Excel. Like that's a weird skill to have, but I'm just good at it. And here's a really good tip. If you are not sure, send a text message to about 12 of your friends that says something like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a business or changing careers or whatever, and said, what is something you think I'm good at? Just kind of see what they say. Like, it's very revealing. I actually did the opposite one year. I sent people a text message saying, hey, I'm looking to improve myself. Where's a place that I'm crummy at and like I could improve? And I was surprised by the responses. Yeah, no, it was really great. Actually, what was interesting is there was one thing, I was a complete blind spot for me, but I had multiple people say, yeah, you do this thing, and it's highly distracting. I was like, oh, I had no idea. And so for like an entire year, I worked on it. Yeah, I'm still not great at it, but I'm at least now aware of it. So, yeah, not all these things that they're going to say are going to be good ideas, but they at least will help you get you on track if you're having trouble saying like, oh yeah, what is something that I'm passionate about and good at? Okay, so the next intersection of like a career or business that you want to look into is what problem can you be the best in the world at solving? And I wrote, can you best the best in the world? It's supposed to be the best. Hopefully I got it right on yours. This is kind of interesting, and I talk with a lot of like college students because they're like, well, I don't know what to do with my life, and this is the direction that I tend to take them down. There are two paths to success. The first one is becoming the best at one specific task or thing, and that is incredibly hard. We know all sorts of people who are like, man, they are the best writer or the best mathematician or the best athlete or the best piano player. Like, it's crazy hard, the best artist. Like, we're talking like in order to be successful, you probably need to be in like that top 1% of people. Now, there are some things that like the type of career job is highly local, and so it's just the best 1% in that local market. But it's really, really hard to do. Instead, the other path to success is to become very good, or at least the top 25% of two or more things. And this is where these and I like to think of them as like interesting combinations. Like, for example, maybe you're good at drawing and telling jokes. You actually did a pretty good job of like writing comics. Or maybe you are multilingual and good at cooking. And so that's a place where in order to be an amazing chef, or at least to be a good chef teacher, like you got to be, Food Network top quality stuff. But if you're able to teach other people who don't speak a language that's native to this area, you don't have to be the best of the best. You just got to be pretty good. And so for yourself, you might think about what are those combination of interesting things. For me, one of the things, like I said, I'm good at Excel, and I'd like to think I'm like top 1%, but I'm at least top 25% there. And then I knew I was also good at presenting information. And so for me, when I worked for HP, this was a killer combination because I could do an analysis and then tell people about it in such a way that they could actually make a decision. So that was a good combo for me. And I worked with people who were great at the analysis, and they do it, and you'd be like, it looks like what you did was really complicated and hard, but I don't understand what you did. And then I worked with other people who they were great at giving presentations, but they had no idea what they were talking about. And so you want to find what's my combination of stuff that is interesting. And then once you, and you may have an area where you say, yeah, you know what, I'm passionate about this, but I'm not 100% certain how to turn this into a skill. That's where educating yourself is really easy. And with the internet today, it's shockingly easy to become a top 25% in the world at something. You just start with Google, or if you go to YouTube and type how to do whatever, I would tell people being a landlord was probably really, really hard before YouTube, because now I could just go on how to like replace a window, and there's hundreds of videos where people go, oh yeah, here's exactly how you do it. And you go, oh wow, cool, like, I wouldn't have known that otherwise. I'm actually really impressed now. So my dad, when I was growing up, we had a Suburban. He bought this, it was a diesel where the engine had blown up, and he converted it to an unleaded car, which I've now learned that I'm an adult is incredibly hard. And there was no Google, there was no YouTube when he did it. And so what we used to do Saturday mornings, because we were weird, is we would go car shopping. And what my dad would do, again, this is like all pre like good camera phones too. We would find Suburbans that were unleaded, and he would pretend to want to buy it. And they go, oh yeah, let me check out the engine. And he'd lift it up, and he would just stare at it. And he was memorizing the next step of what he was going to do for that conversion. Oh yeah, it took him like a year to do this thing. And so that was my weekend as a kid for a year. We were like, yeah, it was, I like to think they eventually figured out like, hey, oh, he's not a buyer, don't worry about him. But yeah, just super funny. Like that was what he did because we didn't have all these amazing resources. So all that to say, like it's significantly easier to learn something if you're like, yeah, I think I'm interested in this, I'm pretty good at it, I think I could get better at it. Like you can learn how to do it. And then the other one, again, for a career or business is the idea, what drives the economic engine, or how you make money doing it, is an important question. So a thing to remember is that all these things take time. Even if you are deciding to apply for a job, like those things take time or to find it. And really important is to remember it's not about yourself, it's about serving other people. And when you have that mindset, it just kind of helps with it. So that is an overview of earning income. It's kind of a higher level kind of mindset, more piece as opposed to here are the websites you go to. But any questions about that? Cool. And I would say like too, it doesn't necessarily even have to apply to a full-time thing. It might be one of those like, again, especially with the internet, there's some really cool opportunities to do a lot of part-time things where you can help people with stuff. I know like, for example, my daughter, she does piano, and there's a lady, she does that on the side. Like that's a part-time gig that she does. And for her, the combination is she's an elementary school teacher and knows how to play piano, so she can teach elementary kids school. She can teach elementary-aged kids piano effectively, right? So that was her combination of skills that she had. So that'd be my, yeah, if you're looking to, you know, if you go through that first exercise, right, of creating a conscious spending plan, you go, oh man, that whole like, that number's not as big as I want it to be. That's where I would look into the income side of things and doing stuff on the side. This next one section is giving. And giving's kind of, it's an interesting but yet fun category. So if you want to give, the first recommendation I would have is to identify a giving dream. Okay, this is kind of fun. If you could give anything, what would it be? And do you feel the pull to give a specific dollar amount, or maybe to sponsor a child, or to start a nonprofit? The idea, like just write down all these ideas of like, oh yes, I would love to give to it. And don't worry about the how. Excuse me, don't worry about the how. Set it as a family goal, and you'll be surprised when opportunities arise. So like, just to try to get you to think bigger. So my wife and I, our goal is to buy a house that's like an Airbnb vacation rental type thing, but then give it away to people to use. So like, for example, when family comes to town, we can give it to them. If there's people who, like who my wife works with, who are just like, man, they just look like they need a break, go, hey, have a weekend on us, enjoy yourself. So that's like one of our giving dreams. I have another one, but I'm too scared to say it out loud, so I'm not going to, but because it's a really big one. What are some of those dreams that you have? Some other ways that you can try to figure that out is you can say like, what are things that you are grateful for, or what breaks your heart? And those are other ways to figure it out. So I am on the board of directors of Love Inc., which is a nonprofit in the area that helps people who just need some help in life. And it's really interesting. We've been talking about the type of people who give to Love Inc., and almost all of them, they give out of what breaks their heart. They had some sort of tragedy happen in their life, and they don't want other people to go through that, and that's why they give. So it's kind of an interesting, like, yeah, that's the motivating factor. So if you have something like that, yeah, there are probably organizations out there that could use your help. I thought this was interesting too. I read this in a book, it says, never suppress a generous thought. So if you have an idea for like getting a random gift for someone or buying somebody coffee, oh man, just run with it. Just go for it. Good things happen when you do that. And this is another thing that my wife and I have done is start a seed account. And so this is a category in the budget, so this is one of our 16, or a savings account that is solely used for giving. And so for us, it's super nice because we will have people approach us fairly regularly who say, hey, I'm taking this trip, or I want help with this. We can go to the account and go, okay, cool, we have a balance of this much. Sure, we will give some of that towards you. And so it has just reduced a lot of that like agonizing that we have over opportunities. And there was like one super small example. Jesse's brother, my wife, Jesse's brother, was going on a trip, and he didn't have a camera. And so this was kind of like pre-cell phone, smartphone days. I'm dating myself a little bit, but he didn't have a camera. And we're like, dude, you're going on this awesome like lifelong trip that you will remember for the rest of your life, and you have no way to capture memories. And so we used the funds to help him get a camera so he could remember it. So things like that. Any questions on the giving piece of it? You'll notice I didn't give an exact percentage or like you should be doing this. It's more of like, where's your heart leading you? Go do that. All right, sweet. All right, we're going to talk about the fun one, which is investing. I think it's fun, is investing. And so you want to, it's very interesting what professionals you talk to. A lot of them will say, invest 10% of your income into assets. I can tell you, because my mom was a financial planner, 10% is not enough. It just isn't. And to be honest, 15% is the bare minimum. If you could afford 30%, I would do that. There was one point, we didn't have kids. We both had jobs. Jesse and I, we were investing 70% of our income. And you can imagine how that skyrockets things really fast if you're able to do that. But 15% is by far the minimum. There's this guy out there, this is probably the first financial book I read in 7th grade, because I'm a weirdo, but his name is Robert Kiyosaki, and he wrote this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and he's got a very interesting definition of assets and liabilities, and I think we tend to get them, I think it's good. He says an asset is something that puts money into your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. Okay, so, and usually people are like, yeah, I totally agree, until I say like, okay, tell me about your primary residence. Is that an asset or a liability? and so most people, the definition that, their primary home, they go, oh, it's an asset. However, when you go through his definition, it's, well, you have to give money to maintenance, to utilities, to, these different areas. Like on whole, money comes out of your pocket. Now, if you have a rental like I do, and you buy at the right price, money comes in, and now all of a sudden it's an asset. And we've had stuff where we lived in a place and it was a liability, and then we moved out, rented it out, and it suddenly flipped and became an asset to us. And this isn't a balance sheet exercise. It's more of a what's your mindset towards when you are investing, what are things that are genuinely assets? I know a lot of people, they will go, oh yeah, my car is an asset, and so I need to go buy this high-end, awesome car. I'm like, yeah, but is it? Because that's money that's coming out of your pocket. And I get you need your car to get to work or to do whatever you're doing. I get it, but the fact that it's having money out means you should have that approach of, should I minimizing the amount that is a liability is kind of the mindset there. Does that make sense? Okay, good. The house is a very interesting one. Actually, I just learned this recently. In the investing world, they have a classification for what someone who would be considered an accredited investor, which is this special designation that essentially means you can invest in whatever you want. And the interesting thing is they actually exclude your primary residence as part of the calculation to determine if you're an accredited investor. So the government doesn't even think of your house as an asset. Yeah. So I saw that recently. Like, look at that, interesting. So your goal is to buy assets that put money in your pocket and minimize liabilities that take money out of your pocket. And there are all sorts of ways to do this. You can do it directly or through intermediaries. For example, when I was working for HP, I had a 401k through my employer, and I also had a Roth IRA with the Vanguard, and it's a VTSMX, which is just their total market index fund, is all that it was. And so that was where I was putting my money, and that was, to buy assets. So if you are primarily...
When you talk about assets it some sort of shares, or you know, the market stock, or what is it exactly?
Yeah, so there's
because I understand that the asset, in order to become asset at some point, it has to be liability in the first place, like the house or the car. If you're trying to get a car and then you can later on rent it while you're having another car of personal use, then this one becomes, the first one becomes an asset.
Yeah,
instead of a
okay.
liability. So if I'm going to invest 15% anywhere, and it wouldn't be my primary residence or my primary car, where would that be?
Yes.
Without getting it. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, something that would make me money at the end of the year.
Yeah, so there are 4 primary categories. I'm going to see if I can remember them off the top of my head. So the first one is like what they call cash-based assets. So think stock market, bond market, that kind of stuff.
What is it, the second?
Like bond market.
Oh, bond market.
Yeah. So the stock market, you're essentially buying a piece of another company, right?
Yeah.
Ideally, that other company makes money that pays back to you or goes up in value. And so that's one example of an asset. Another one that you can own are commodities, right? And these are like tangible things. Think oil. That's a big one. That's the biggest one. But then there are other types of commodities like land, I think falls into this category, that you own this particular item that is valuable that other people are willing to pay for. Gold, silver, those are huge ones. And so that's another one that you can buy those and other people will pay you more money for them. And so you'll get those. Another one, the one that I have gone all in on is real estate. And that is an example, and the reason why I like it is it has the advantages of the commodity in the sense that it's this valuable thing that you own, but it also, like, you don't have to sell it to get money every single month from it. So that's why I like it. And there is a fourth one, and I cannot think of what it is right now, but it's amazing, I'm sure. But usually people, they fall into the, I'm going to buy stocks through like my employer 401k. They may do some gold and silver, as usually gets technical, a hedge against inflation. I would not put Bitcoin in that camp. Just ignore it. Don't worry about it. I think that is betting, in my opinion, but some people will put that in that camp as an asset, as a commodity. And then real estate's another example. Downside of real estate is you usually need a lot of money to get started. Nice part about the stock market is you can open up a Robinhood account for free, and for $10, you're going, which is super nice. Or again, your employer, they can siphon off.
Excuse me, your Roma account was that?
Oh, Robinhood. Yeah, just like the guy who takes from the rich and gives to the poor. That's their idea.
And you just go online and have that?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to do individual stocks, yes. The other really good one, and I think I write this resource somewhere down else with you, is Vanguard. .org, .com. They're a nonprofit, so it might be a .org. It's probably both. Yeah, I do mention it. That honestly is if you are not willing to manage the asset yourself. Vanguard's the way that I would go. Because they, like I said, they're a nonprofit, they're crazy cheap, and what you can do is you can open up all sorts of accounts with them, and you can even give them certain rules on how to do it. That's one where it probably makes sense to sit down with someone at one point in time, say, okay, here's my specific situation, here's what I'm looking to do, here are my goals, and they can help you get set up.
Because I heard there were some, I wouldn't know how to call them, like probably companies or probably stock company, I don't really, or investment companies probably, where you could go and have a payment, like a monthly payment of, let's say 15%, or just a regular amount of money that you, let's say $100 every month, I'm just saying, whatever. And then they would use that in order, I think, to fund other companies or to invest in other companies, but all in all, you would just give money, and by the end of the year, you would receive like revenues, or what we call, it's like on income, like extra revenue on. A dividend is usually, So is Vanguard one of them?
Yes.
So this is the concept?
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah, you can get, depends on there's different words for it. There's a mutual fund and an index fund. They're very similar, but technically separate. And that's the idea, is you buy into this fund, which then owns hundreds, if not thousands, of companies. And so, so it's as if you are buying just a whole bunch of them. It's a very easy way of diversifying. And they figured out how to use computer algorithms to optimize the diversification instead of you having to spend all the time doing it yourself. That would be, so yeah, an index fund. And there's the Vanguard Total Market Index Fund is like the gold star that most people recommend. Another one to think about though is if say you or your husband have a job that has a 401k, there's often some sort of matching that happens with there. That is like free money, take it and run. And so do that, which is what I did.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, these are great.
New to me, but it's like if one of us has the 401k, then we go and tell Vanguard, for example, that we have it, and then they will do something to make you
Yeah.
more.
Okay, good question. Usually your employer. So like for example, so when I worked for HP had a 401k, and I would just, as part of their internal system, I would say, hey, I want you to move whatever the number was, like $100, like you were talking about, put $100 into my 401k. And so before I even got my paycheck, it would just magically disappear into this other account. And then HP had a matching thing, and so I wouldn't see $100, I would see $200 in my account up to a certain amount. So I had like 100% return on my money instantly. It was great. And so we would do that. In addition to that, we also had a Vanguard account. And that was one where every single month there would be a monthly transfer from my checking account into that Vanguard account. That was, it was a Roth IRA, which is IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account.
Okay,
Yeah, and so it would also go into that, and then that was its own separate fund. So we had the two of them
but then
going.
Those companies are using your IRA in order to fund other companies or buy shares with them or invest with them, right? This is the idea, right? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, there are lots of them. The nice part about Vanguard is because they're a nonprofit, they don't keep any profits themselves, and so they are significantly cheaper. I think I wrote it down, like 82% cheaper than most other people. It's kind of ridiculous. And really it was this guy, he worked for a big company that was doing what you're describing, and he saw the fees that were going on, and he got frustrated with it. So he was like, forget this, like we're not doing anything valuable. And so he started at Vanguard. And with that whole thing of like, this is a nonprofit, employee owned, however you want to think about it. And he goes, yeah, we're going to do this cheap. And he's like, and it doesn't have to be hard. So, yeah. All right, so if you are primarily invested in the stock market via, Vanguard or your 401k, usually the question arises of like, okay, how much do I need to save before we can stop working? And there's what's called the 4% rule. This is going to sound a little bit goofy right now given all of the inflation stuff going on, but in general, this rule works. If we fast forward 30, 40 years from now, this rule is going to work for you. So usually we assume that the stock market increases about 7% each year, which historically on average it does. And we assume that inflation is about 3%. Historically on average it is. And so when you take the difference, that's 4%. And so what that means is you could withdraw 4% from whatever your balance is every single year, and you're not going to run out of money. So you can keep, which is super nice. There are some more complicated stuff where you can get into life expectancy and, okay, what needs to happen to get the account to zero. For now, don't worry about that. So what you want to say is, so what you want to do is you want to have enough money where you get to a point where you can withdraw 4% and it's going to cover your living expenses. That's the goal. And that might be a weird way to think about it. So here's another way to think about it. Take your annual expenses and multiply it times 25. We just did the inverse of the math. And so if you are spending, I'm not even pretending to do this math. Trying to think. If you're spending $10,000 a year, which is not a lot at all, you would then, I actually do my own math here. So if you're spending $40,000 a year, here we go. That means if you multiply that times 25, you would need to save $1 million in the stock market to do it. Now, and that also means if you're spending $80 million or $80,000 a year, you need to save $2 million to get there. And so you can kind of see how these things ladder on top of each other, right? If you spend less than you earn and you really go after that, that reduces your expenses. And so not only does it make it easier to save and do the snowball so you can invest more money, but you need to invest less in order to make sure you cover your living expenses. So there really is a lot of value in minimizing your expenses every single year. That's probably one of the reasons why I was able to quit my job after working for 12 years, is because my wife and I were very conscious about how much we spent. And we are significantly under the average for normal people in this area. So that's kind of the math. And obviously, there are other stuff out there.
So
like
what you're saying is that we need to reduce our expenses in order to get enough money that would be logical or reasonable from the stock market, right? Because, you know, $10,000 or $10,000, $100,000 you're saying?
Yeah.
$1 million or
Well, so if you're spending, let's say your expenses are $80,000 a year,
yeah.
But your income is also, let's say, $85,000 a year, right? That means you only have this $5,000 buffer to invest, which A, isn't 15%. You'll just never be able to stop working. Right, that's kind of the math. So you gotta so that's where that minimum of 15% comes in. Where if you do 15%, like the ratios kind of work. Where okay, after about 30 years of investing, you'll hit whatever that magic rate. You'll hit that ratio for it. So that's kind of how they back into the 15% number. And they used to do it for 10%, but again, the math just doesn't quite work. And part of it's like life expectancies have increased, and so you're retired for longer, and so that 10% just doesn't work like it used to. But yeah, no, it's definitely, so you want to be spending, another way to think of it is you want to be spending at least 15% less than what you're earning.
Yeah,
so then you can
invest those 15% less from your expenses
Yep.
into the stock
Yep.
market. And then you would ask for that money once you're retired or whenever you want. To ask for that money. I want to get all the
Yes.
money that I earned.
And there are some details behind there. It depends on the type of account. If it's a 401k or if there's the word retirement anywhere in there, yes, you have to wait until you're a certain age before you can withdraw it. I mean, without penalty is the way to say it. But yeah, otherwise, yes, you can withdraw it, whatever. You get to pay taxes when you do that, so yay. But now for my example, so I was working for HP and I had been putting money into my 401k. And my business had been growing. And we reached this point where I was like, we were really close to where my rental income was going to cover all of our expenses. And so we made a judgment call, and I withdrew all the money for my 401k. I paid a ridiculous amount of taxes and fees in order to do it, but it let me buy another property so I could quit my job. And I went, I don't know if I care. And so that was the decision that I made. But yeah, typically you want to wait and don't do that. But that was me, where I had an opportunity to buy a property where the returns were going to be like close to 50%, and I said, yeah, don't care. And so it was worth it for me. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about a less fun topic. It's about protecting your future. We're going to talk about insurance, which is also like one of the more confusing things. So yay for that. So you want to review your insurance about once a year. And I know that's super lame and not fun, but it's worth it. And so we're going to talk about the different types of insurance that you can get. So in general, there's liability insurance. That's the big one that we're all, something bad happens, and so you want to get covered for it. And so there's things like car insurance, health insurance, home insurance. Those are all different types of liability insurance. And so the idea is, now that you have something, now that you're saving and investing, you have something that's worth protecting. So you want to make sure that if there is a catastrophe in your life, it doesn't destroy you and your family financially. It's kind of the idea. So there's some terms that I think are just helpful to know, because I'm regularly like, oh, okay, what is this thing again? The policy is the actual contract that says, hey, you're insured, you're protected, congratulations. The coverage is the scope of that protection, and that's provided by the policy. It says what things it'll pay for and how much it'll pay for, and it's miserable to read. I'm sorry, but it's worth it. The premium that's a fancy way of saying like the cost to you. And so that's the price of the policy. And sometimes you pay monthly, sometimes annually, sometimes every 6 months. It kind of depends. The claim is when you ask the insurance company to pay some bill for you, right? You get into a car accident, you make a claim. And then finally, your deductible is the amount you'll have to pay before insurance starts paying the bill for you. You want to try to make sure that that deductible is no more than half your emergency fund. Okay, so yeah, when you first get started on this $1,000, you may have a small deductible, but then as you save more, you can have a bigger deductible. So that's a rule of thumb for you. All right, life insurance. Oh, there's so many types of life insurance. There's term, there's permanent, there's whole life, there's universal, there's limited pay, there's accidental death, there's group, there's all sorts. You only need to care about 2 of them, okay? And you can tell your insurance guy, don't tell me about the other ones. And that's term and group life insurance. Okay, so term is very straightforward. You pay a fixed amount every single month for a fixed amount of time for a fixed payout. That's the entire idea. So you can buy like a 30-year life insurance, say like $1 million, and you pay a fixed amount for those 30 years. And then if you die within that 30-year time period, your benefactor would get $1 million. Very straightforward, very simple, easy to plan on. Now here's the important part. If you stop paying or you die 30 years and 1 day later without like renewing it, your benefactor would get 0. So that's like, there's no grace there. Like if you sign up for it, go all the way through. But they're very clear about it, which is nice. And they have automatic payments, which is also kind of nice, so you don't forget. The other one that's important is group, which is effectively the exact same thing as term life insurance, but it covers a group of people. So very often, like if your company ever offers life insurance or OSU offers life insurance, this is what it is. It's term, it's group life insurance, but for a lot of people. The nice part about it is that it's cheap because usually they get a discount because they can say, hey, we're going to do this for lots and lots and lots of people, which is super nice. So like, for example, I got term life insurance, but it's like a group policy through Willamette as an alumni because it was just cheaper to go that way than it was to go out on my own. So the bad part about it is that it's usually tied with your employment. So if you quit, you no longer get it. Nice part of me, I'll be an alumni the rest of my life, so I'm not worried about it. And so, and just another thing is you have to look at the numbers, it may not be enough. So I know a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll get life insurance through their company, but it doesn't quite cover what that amount needs to be, which I'll tell you in a little bit. And so then they'll supplement it with another plan of their own to kind of get them over the hump there. You want to avoid whole life insurance. Your agent is going to tell you all about it. They're going to be pumped about it. It is the best thing since sliced bread, according to them, because they get paid a ton for doing it. So you do not want whole life insurance. They're going to tell you, you can even invest some of that money. You can take it out as a loan. It has all sorts of flexible options. They are totally right. You are better off to take the difference that you would have paid for whole and invest it yourself. And you get to control it, you get to direct it instead of them. But again, I had an agent. I ended up, I didn't fire him, but I moved to someone else, and it was because every single time we talked, he was like, hey, we need to get you on whole life insurance. I was like, and after like the 3rd time of me telling him no, I was like, dude, this isn't fun anymore. Like, I don't actually enjoy talking to you because you're trying to get me to do this one thing. So term insurance, that's where it's at. So question is, how much life insurance do you need? Turns out some people have done some math around this. So there's usually some final expenses that have to happen, just to kind of clean up your life. That usually comes out to around $15,000, so you want at least that. It's good to include all your mortgages and other debts. So think car loans, student loans, in addition to your mortgage. If you want to pay for college for your kids, which could be hard to predict, but essentially if you take the current tuition rates from a school that they might attend and you add 5% every year, that kind of gives you an idea. That's the big number, in my opinion. And then the other one that you care about is your income. Here's some weird math for it. What you do is you divide your income by 2, and then you divide it by 5% for some reason. And this is a lump sum that will pay out half of your income at a 5% withdrawal rate. So you divide it by 2, cuts it in half, and then when you divide it by 5%, it's the equivalent of multiplying it times 5, you get a bigger number. And so that's just kind of, it tells you, yeah, here's what it would be at the 5% withdrawal rate, essentially. There are all sorts of options to help you with insurance. Like I said, if you've, I'm willing to bet OSU has something. But Xander Insurance is one that I've talked to. Dave Ramsey recommends them. They're pretty cheap relative to everyone else. But there's a bunch of them out there. If you just type it in, there's a bunch of them. Also, for planning and protecting your future is getting a will. This again, it seems like it should be really straightforward, but it's just not. So a will is a legal document where you name who will manage your estate and your stuff, and who your stuff will transfer to at your death. That's what it is.
And this is in case you have a company.
No, you just no matter what. Yeah. That's in case you have kids. Or you own a house or a car or whatever. Because if you don't do that, then what happens is it goes to the court and it goes through probate, and it's a very long process. It's drawn out, it's contentious. Whereas if you have a piece of paper that says, here's what I want, then they just read that and they just do whatever you say. Here's a fun story. In 1926, Charles Vance Miller, he was a prominent Canadian lawyer, offered the bulk of his estate to the Toronto woman who had the greatest number of children in the 10 years after his death. Okay? So there were attempts to invalidate his will, but they were all unsuccessful, and the bulk of Miller's fortune was split between 4 women who had 9 children each. So you can do all sorts of stuff in this will. I don't necessarily recommend that, but yeah, you can have and there have been movies made about this kind of stuff where someone's like, oh yeah, you do this, and they get unwieldy really quick. Yeah, so that's a will. I highly recommend you have one. You can technically write one on your own, but like all legal things, it's best to get help from a legal professional. Technically, LegalZoom.com is an option. It's an interesting hybrid where it's a LegalZoom.com, where what you can do is you can kind of go in and they've got templates that you start with, and then you can have a lawyer review it after the fact. So it's a little bit cheaper, but and again, it doesn't seem like it should be complicated. And technically, you can write it on a napkin and sign it, and I think. But the other nice part about having a lawyer do it is they keep a copy of everything as well, and so you just it just makes it easy. And then so for all of our stuff, we have a lockbox. It's like a fireproof lockbox that we put our passports and that documentation's in there. And we've told everyone in our family, here's the key to get in. And so they all have it. By the way, just pro tip, I included all of my my main password to get into my computer and my phone and other stuff, because that's now a thing. And then I have a password manager, and so I have the password for that in there with instructions okay, you want to go to this website, log this in, and now you have access to all my accounts and information. Just because I don't know, I don't want them fumbling around trying to figure it out. So yeah, that is protecting your future. Any questions there? I know that that can be a little overwhelming. There's just a lot. Okay. All right, this is probably my favorite one, is talking about automation and next steps. We've already talked about Mint. That's a place for you to track your expenses. And again, my encouragement would say to say, what's that one thing you can do to experiment with this month? So just pick one thing, don't go crazy, and just try it. I think is a great exercise. We talked about CapitalOne.com. It's their 360 savings account, and again, it lets you set up all those sub accounts, and you can have automatic transfers going in and out. It can get crazy. It's kind of fun, and we have 16 transfers that happen every single month, so it's just this block of that happened. But yeah, it's super nice. Vanguard.com, yeah, that's the 82% lower cost funds through other investments. Super convenient. And what you want to do is you want to set up an automatic transfer each pay period to automatically put money into whatever that account is. That way, you're not tempted to spend it, is the idea behind that. And you want to start with whatever you can based on the difference between your conscious spending plan and your income. And even if that's only $10 to start, awesome. Start that habit. I know, again, my mom was a financial planner, and she worked for Nationwide, and she worked with a bunch of city employees. And she would tell them, dude, just start. She's 10% or not 10%, $10 if that's all it is. And then she would meet with them 6 months later and say, hey, how about do you think you could do $100 now? And so she would just slowly ratchet them up to that 10 to 15%. And she would say usually like, it might take a couple years, and then all of a sudden it would click. And they go, oh, I get it. And then they jump up to that amount that it needed to be. But at least they had that habit started. So start with something, so you're moving in that right direction. And then I always like this question. It's a really hard one to answer. But like, what would have to happen to increase whatever that amount you're investing to not just 1%, but to 10%? There's this cool book I read called the 10x rule. And that was his thing. It was like, take a reasonable thing and then multiply it by 10. It's like, what would have to happen for that? And then like, and the answer is like, usually in order to do that significantly bigger thing requires a larger structural change in your life. It just gives you some insights for how to do it. Like my wife and I, right? It wasn't like, hey, what would have to happen to save 15%? It's like, what would have to happen to save 70%? Because we started doing some math, right? It's like, man, if you do that, like, I wouldn't have to work for like, I could quit my job in 5 years. We ended up having kids, which is why that slowed down, which is okay. Like, we were right on the cusp of it. I think I was 6 years in, I think, 6 or 7 years in, and we were getting ready, like I was getting ready to quit my job because we were about to hit that number. And then we had our first kid, and so instead my wife quit her job, and I kept working. I was like, oh, that's cool, I guess. And so then I had to keep working for another 5 years. We had another kid too in that mix. But yeah, so it's just a good question to ask. Like if you make it ridiculous, some of the answers you come up with are really insightful. And just important to remember that like personal finance is balance, right? It's really about like minimizing those expenses while maximizing your income while also enjoying life, right? So don't let this consume everything that you do. And I did want to share some resources at the end because I get like this was a lot, and there are some really great things written about it. Some books, I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. He's a fascinating guy. He's a little bit younger, and it's just like he starts out with just really, really actionable, applicable information. He doesn't go too deep into the why because it's like, no, just do this and this will work, trust me. Simple Money, Rich Life by Bob Lotic is also really good. I read that one back in November, so it's a recent read for me. And he just like does a great job of breaking things down. He probably is given the best treatment on giving that I've seen or read anybody give, write about. So he was really good at that. And then the last one is Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. I give this to all of my new tenants because it's just a great overview book. I think one of his cool insights is he goes, there is a correlation between like financial management and like math savviness, but usually because he does this radio show and he talks to lots of people, he goes, for most people, the problem isn't the math, like we all know how to add and subtract. The problem is the psychology, the reasons and motivations behind it. And so he goes into that in his book. It's just really good. And he also focuses a lot on like the marriage part of it, because he like it's a 2-player game. And so really good book. And then there are some really good blogs, MrMoneyMustache.com, which I've talked about. He's kind of stopped writing, I think, because he's got a kid and he's hanging out with his kid all the time now, which is totally reasonable. But like all of his past archives are really, really good. Seed Time is a good one. That's Bob Lotic's blog as well, really good. And then mint.com/blog, they've got one. It tends to be a little bit more general, but so for me, I'm like, yeah, I already know this. But if you're relatively new to this space, it's a great one to get into. And it's very rare that they're pushing their own stuff. You know, there's some blogs where it's like half the post is, this is why we're awesome. They tend to be like, no, straight up, like, here's some good financial stuff to it. So those are some resources. That's what I got. Any questions? And I'm happy to answer like specific situations where you go, okay, what about this or that? With the caveat, obviously, that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what do you recommend for how to teach our kids to summarize these stuff to the kids?
Ooh, good question.
She's 10 years old and she's trying to save some money with something.
Okay.
She's like, I want to buy something, but it's more expensive than the money that she has.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. There's a couple things you can do. There's some good books out there. I read one recently or last year, which was pretty good. And it breaks it all down by age category because, like, yeah, they definitely, like, at different ages have different needs. So, like, for example, what we do with our kids, we do the envelope method, I guess. They have 3 envelopes, and it was super fun. We went to the dollar store, and we're like, pick an envelope that represents you. And so they got 3 of them. And part of it was when they were kids, like, they would get money, and we just kind of, like, put it in this little piggy bank jar thing. And it got to a point where they're like, well, what do we do with this? And like, I don't know, let me think about it. So now what we do is every week they get paid $3, which isn't a ton. And so my daughter is 8 and my son is 6, so a little bit younger. And we were gonna do like this age-based thing, and ultimately decided, it's gonna cause some heartache between the 2 of them, so we're not gonna do it. But we wanted to give them enough to make some decisions and to kind of go from there. So so every week they get paid $3, and they have a giving envelope, they have a spending envelope, and they have a saving envelope, which will eventually get crazy fun. But for now, we tell them you at least have to give $1 to giving because we want to get them into that habit. And then you can do whatever you want with the rest of it. And so, like, my son goes all into spending, and my daughter goes all into saving. Now, here's the catch that we do, and this will morph over time, but for their savings account, for every $1 that is in their saving envelope, we take it, we hold on to it, they don't get it, and then at the end of the week when we go back to it, they get 1/4 for every $1 that they save, which is a ridiculous payout, right? Yeah, and so it's interesting, like my daughter, right, like she starts off with that $2, which barely became $2.50, right? And then she put another $2 in, from that payday, which now she had $4.50, which meant she now got 4 quarters, and it got exponential really quick. Whereas my son was like, oh, dude, I don't have any, I just got spending, cool. But this is where we've had fun with it because we were up in Portland once doing a little trip, and we would tell them hey, you might want to think about bringing your spending envelope, who knows? And we went there was like a farmer's market, and so my son was like, yeah, I got some money to spend, and my daughter was like, oh, I don't have any. I'm like, oh, interesting. And so we've kind of gone down that more experiential route, right, of hey, let's learn how to do this. We've kept it all physical. It's been nice because it helps them with their counting. Now eventually there will come a point in time, because of my background, we're going to have fun with that savings envelope. We'll actually, it'll be more of an investing thing, where we will create different sheets of paper on it, and I'm going to say hey, you can buy this, you can buy this thing, it's a lawnmower, right? And that's all it's going to say on it. And this lawnmower actually pays out $1 every single week or something. Or we'll do one where it's yeah, you can buy this fancy rock. It doesn't pay out anything, but in 7 weeks, you'll get $7 for it. And we'll have different amounts. We might have some of them that are aspirational. Oh yeah, to buy this asset, and we're going to use that kind of language with them, to buy this asset's $25, but the payout's really good. And so we're going to create all sorts of different things for them to, quote, invest in to get them into that mindset. And then for the spending, right now we are keeping it strictly with yeah, these are fun things, when we go somewhere and they want to get something fun. Now here's an interesting one. Our son just came to us yesterday, actually. He goes, Mom, I want to eat hot lunch, because she makes a lunch for him every single day. And my wife is like, well, all right, I got to think about it. She goes, I actually don't know how much it costs us to make your lunch versus that. And so we told him, we don't have an answer right now, but we're going to sit down and we're going to do some math, and we're going to figure out how much lunch costs us. And I told my wife, I was like, I almost don't care what that number is. I want it to be, it costs us $1.75. His hot lunch is $2. And I want ours to be $1.75. So now he's got a choice here. How badly do I want hot lunch? Because we'll say, hey, we'll give you a $1.75. And if you want it, you got to contribute the other quarter. And so that for him is going to be the start of him starting to make those decisions, that conscious decision, right? How important is hot lunch to me versus going to the dollar store to buy some G.I. Joe dude that's going to break in 3 days. And so, so those are the kind of things. What we've decided is by having these envelopes and them getting into that regular habit of it, they'll have opportunities to practice those different decisions. And so we just kind of like this hot lunch one, like that wasn't part of our grand plan, but he came to us with it, and I'm like, oh, sweet, yeah, well, let's use it for this. It is not tied to chores. That is a separate thing. That is something they do because they are part of the family. And so there are certain things that we ask them to do, like feed the dog and clean the bathroom and pick up their toys. Like they do that no matter what. And so we have also, there are some things where we're like, yeah, these are things that normally mom and dad does, but we hate. Washing dishes. So if you're willing to help out, yeah, we will pay above and beyond for that. The brilliant part of what we're doing right now is like the money we're using is stuff that they were given as a kid. So we're just giving them back their own money. It's not costing us anything. And there will come a point, which is part of our like, yeah, we're totally okay with that. There will come a point in time where we'll exhaust those funds. And that's when we'll start to say like, hey, here's things that we're going to start paying for anyways, like food and clothing and stuff. And so we will slowly give them more responsibility for those things. It's been really interesting just for my wife and I at the beginning when they're like, they're shopping through a store and just being like, yeah, we're going to like do what you want. I'm not going to say anything, let them make their own choices. My daughter is very much in that category of like, there's this one big thing I want, I'm willing to save for it, I'm gonna get this thing, this is what I want. When my son is like, these are the first 20 things that I saw and they're all $1 each, so I'm gonna get all those. And they're just two different styles. So that's been interesting for us to observe and see and help us try to get them. So that's a big thing that we've been doing.